pull the shot back. The height difference is glaring.
I want to thank the Ephraim Heritage Foundation website. You know, it's no secret to anybody that the last 8 months have been a very challenging time. Physically, emotionally, financially, politically, the world has been in complete turmoil. Every day has presented new issues, new worries, more anxiety. And just when we thought it was over, then it started all over again. Last week, the Gedolim called for a Yom Tefillah for all of Klal Yisrael. They said that we should say Avinu Malkeinu. And one of my chaverim pointed out, he said, when was the last time we did that? I don't remember such a thing. Avinu Malkeinu, if it's not a fast day, or between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, these are serious times. And to add insult to injury, just the other day we lost one of the Gedolei Yisrael, Rav David Feinstein, Zecher Tzadik, V'Kadosh Levracha. What can we do? What can we possibly do to change the situation around? And our Gedolim tell us that we need to take action. What kind of action? Famous pasuk in Mishlei, Shomer Pivu Lashona, one who guards his mouth and his words. Shomer Mitzaras Nafsho, he guards his speech. And the Chavetz Chaim asks, what is it about Shmiras Halashon that is such an important mitzvah? There's our neighbors and our co-workers with chesed, with rachamim. Then Hashem looks down upon us and treats us with that same chesed and with that same rachamim. At the beginning of the pandemic, Rav Chaim Kanievsky Shlita sent out a letter. And at the beginning of his letter, I quote, he said, Al kol echad lehischazek. It's on every person to strengthen themselves. Ulihizoher me lashon hara rechilas. And to be careful from speaking lashon hara and rechilas. And then he continues on in the letter, and at the end of the letter, he concludes with the following. He says, V'kol hamischazek, anyone who strengthens themselves in this area, Tagein hazechus alav, then the schus will serve as a protection on him, the al b'nei beso, and on his family, shelo yichla echad mehem, that nobody should get sick. And I found it very interesting that when you read carefully into the words that Reb Chaim is writing, he doesn't say that the person of Shmiras Halashon is somebody who completely changes around his ways and never have impact. Because one of the first steps to making change, one of the first steps to growing in our Shmiras Halashon is understanding the far-reaching impact that our words have. You know, my cousin, Rabbi Moshe Siegel, shared with me an incredible story about two girls in Israel. They were sitting on the bus, and they were having conversation. Wow, how'd she do that? You know, because of what you said to me now, I know about this girl, and I'm going to make sure to end the shidduch right away. And with that, she left the bus. And the girls turned bright red, and they quickly chased after her. And they said, no, we're so sorry. We didn't mean that. We didn't mean to say that about her. We're just feeling jealous that she got engaged before us. And whatever, we started the conversation, but none of that is true. We don't mean that. Please don't end the shidduch. And the lady looked back at them, and she said, I'm not really the mother of the chassan, of your words, and what it could have caused. And I think we all know similar stories, how unfortunately, just a few told me such an unbelievable story the other day about a teacher named Mrs. Schwartz, who was teaching a 6th grade class 40 years ago. She was teaching English. She was talking about the famous poem, Casey at the Bat at the time. And after the girls finished the poem, she was writing, but she had no ideas. Nothing came to her mind. Into the teacher, thinking she was going to get in trouble for her sarcasm. And with that, the conversation here in Israel. And she told us that every time she sits down to write another song, to write another popular song, over the next 4 weeks, we're going to be working on trying to grow in an incredible way. We have such hakaras hatov to Rabbi.
It's a very big honor for me to be able to speak tonight on the topic Words Have Impact. And for me, it's actually very personal. Rabbi Mas, that was the school and the yeshiva that I attended many years ago here in South Florida. So to be able to do this as an expression of my hakaras hatov, deepest appreciation, to express my hakaras hatov to all of the Rabbeim, all of the teachers, all of the moirais, really everyone involved in these wonderful, wonderful institutions, as I said, where I was privileged many years ago to attend. Firstly in Toras Emes, and then for a number of years in Yeshiva Toras Chaim. And I am mispal to the Ribbono Shel Olam that the school and the yeshiva should be able to continue their avodas hakodesh, to continue to change the landscape here in South Florida, and to Be'ezras Hashem, in a safe and healthy way, continue to be mechanech and madrich hundreds and hundreds, thousands of our children. On a more personal level, I want to thank a very dear yedid, a friend of mine, Rabbi Yaakov Moskowitz, Shmira. Chazal tell us, the Ribbono Shel Olam says, Mikol hatzaros habois aleichem ani yochel lahatzil eschem. I want all those that through Chazak, wherever you might be, please take these words, embed it and sear it in your hearts. Chazal tell us, Mikol tragedy, I can save you. This is the Ribbono Shel Olam talking, Techaveh. Shoit lashon eschem techaveh. Shoit lashon techaveh. We must stay away from a proud lahatzil eschem. And the Ribbono Shel Olam, from tonight's Shmiras Halashon initiative, from these few out the Gula Shalema, but remember, read about the point 3. Uma says, Amar Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel tells us, by sending out his brothers, before he revealed his identity, L'sakona gedola yarad. He put himself in great danger. Why did he put himself in great danger? Because nobody would be in the room then. And perhaps when he reveals his identity to his brothers may get up and kill him. Nobody would be around. Nobody would know. He put himself in great and literally grave danger. Azay zokta would have been the probability that his brothers would kill him and nobody would know about it. Why not keep people around in the room when you reveal your identity, Yosef? And the Medrash Tanchuma tells us, because if others would be in the room when he would reveal his identity to his brothers, Ani Yosef, they'd be embarrassed. And he said, it's just not worth it. It's just not worth saying it, embarrassing it. Words have impact. He felt he would rather be killed at the hands of his brothers and nobody would know, so as not to embarrass them and make them suffer a busha, because it's just not worth it. Reb Leib Chasman, Zechum proper person. Take a look, there's a psikta. It is a remarkable pshat. The psikta tells us that for the last 17 years of Yaakov Avinu's life, he and Yosef, of course, lived together in Mitzrayim. How many times, says the psikta, do you think that many thousands of times did Yosef visit Yaakov just down the block in Mitzrayim? The psikta tells us that in 17 years, that perhaps in the privacy of the home, Yaakov Avinu not knowing, how did Yosef, my son, end up in Mitzrayim? What happened to those missing years? What happened to those 20 plus years? He might inquire from Yosef what happened, and Yosef would have to reveal what his brothers did. Although the desire for Yosef to be united with his father privately in the home is beyond anything we could imagine. And then take a look at the Sifarnoi. The Sifarnoi tells us about the story, the well-known story, when the wife of Potiphar. Why the redundancy? Why say Vayonos and Vayetze? Vayonos and Vayetze essentially mean the same thing. He fled and he ran outside. Either say Vayonos or Vayetze. Why are both expressions necessary? The Sefarnai tells us something, but if he would have continued to run at that lightning speed down Ahmed Boulevard, whatever it might have been in Egypt, had he continued to run that way down the street, we know what happens when you see somebody running down the street. You say, what happened? What happened? Are you okay? What happened? What happened? Are you all right? Tell me what happened. And he was afraid that if somebody would see him running and they'd inquire what happened, he'd have to speak negatively about Ashes Potiphar. And he said, it's just not worth it. So Vayana, says the Sefarna, means running out of the clutches of Aveira. He ran as quickly as he could, but once he got outside the doors of the palace, Vayetze hachutza, slowly, deliberately, methodically, so as not to attract any attention. Because had he attracted attention and continued running, they would have said, what's the matter, Yosef? Are you okay? And then he would have had to speak negatively about Ashes Potiphar, Meir Verabaisai. Who are we talking about? Certainly we could understand from the Medrash Tanchum and the Psikta, he didn't want to speak about his brothers. But here was Ashes Potiphar, and he still felt it's just not worth it to attract any attention, because Yosef HaTzadik is teaching us the Chazal we opened up with, to merit the blessings of the Ribbono Shel Olam, to be able to have. There is a fellow who a few years ago made a siyum on a Masechta. We'll use his first name, it's Kenny. And he confided in someone that he had not made a siyum on a Masechta or seriously opened this point. It's hard to say, it's hard to repeat, but I'm going to tell you what this person said to this young boy Kenny, trying to teach him the Gemara again and again, and it wasn't working. And it's not only that the Rebbe became exactly called it is for you to learn that instead of naming you Kenny, they should have named you Kenisht. And of course, Kenisht means if Kenisht I can't. How could you say that? Words have impact. Words have impact. How could you say that to an impressionable child? Saying that to a child and the child. This never pick up his right hand and cover his eyes. And she was totally flummoxed. Why is he not doing it? Such a simple thing. Pick up your right hand and say the first part. The hands, working hands, a left and a right. So she didn't understand what praise to me. Oh, you have two left hands. Now, of course, we're familiar with the expression two left feet. The mother, seeing how clumsy he was, said to the child, oh, you have two left hands. And so naturally, he heard that he has two left hands. It's not a joke, Rabbi. It's a true story that happened. Hearing his mother say, you have two left hands, he believed he has two left hands. He doesn't have a right hand, and therefore he can't go ahead and lift up a right hand to go ahead and say, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Words have impact. Shoit Lashon Techaveh. And that explains a very beautiful story how on one occasion a woman who was teaching, perhaps it was the fourth grade girls, in the middle of the year came home and called her father, crying tears of joy. Her father was a venerated mechanech and told her father, what you told me in the beginning of the year, Tati, saved me. You told me in the beginning of the year something happened. She told me that the homework, it was not worth it. And as she sat down in her seat, she raised her hand and then she said, Mora, I'm so sorry, I forgot to tell you. Please excuse me that the homework and the assignment and the signature was so messy. It was done by my father, as I told you, but my father is blind. And as a result of his being blind, it doesn't come out as neatly as perhaps he or one would like. And so she cried and told her father, Tati, you saved me. I was about to say it and then I remembered your words. Words have impact. Shoit Lashon Techaveh. It's just not worth it. And I didn't say anything. And as a result, I spared myself, and more importantly, that child, of what could have been another Kenny situation, of what could have been another you have two left hands situation. It's really the pshat of the Tolner Rebbe. The Tolner Rebbe tells us so powerfully. Did you ever wonder about the reward for the frog versus the reward for the dog? The frog you don't find really has any exceptional reward. No tzardeya has an exceptional reward. And yet what's the reward for the kelev, basar, treifa? A fine Delmonico steak, la kelev tashlicha noisei. You throw it to the dog. Why? They both did spectacular things. The frog, In the Makot Sardei, it was Meiser Nefesh. It jumped into fire, it's spectacular. The night of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the dog didn't say anything. It didn't make any noise, it didn't bark, it didn't do anything so as to reveal and give away our identity of what was transpiring that night. But if both the frog and the dog did something so spectacular, why do you only find that essentially there's a reward for the kelev, bosser, treifa? You give it a delmonico and meat all the time. But the frog doesn't get any such reward. Why? The frog also displayed tremendous Mesiras Nefesh, jumping into the ovens and the fires. And the Tolna Rebbe says, Weistois it must be, that as wonderful as it is to be Meiser Nefesh and to jump into fires, das kommt nicht to remaining silent. It's not as impressive as learning, shh, don't say it. You think saying that comment to your spouse that you view a little bit sarcastic, cynical, facetious, because you had to get in the last word. Because it was bothering you, so you had to get in the last word. So you said it to your spouse, to your sibling, to your parent, to your child, to your relative, to your coworker, to the unaffiliated yid. The art of remaining silent indeed deserves to be rewarded. Says the Tolna Rebbe, that's why, as amazing as the Mesiras Nefesh is to jump into an oven and a fire, but far more impressive is to learn the art. Remain silent. Because as we've said so far in the first half, it's just not worth it. And if people listening tonight, there will be one person who will realize the next time they want to get in that comment, it's biting, it causes the person to wonder throughout the day, what happened to our relationship? It causes people to have sleep. I beg you, it's just not worth it. Now, it's at this point that I would like, as Rabbi Moskowitz so eloquently said, yes, words have impact, but they have impact in another way as well. And it's at this point in the talk, the Gemara clearly tells us it's unfair to this one, and the other is unfair to this one. And then it dawned on me, we learn Oinos Dvarim from Oinos Mamoin. It must be that the Chazal are teaching us that when it comes to Oinos Dvarim, verbal abuse, there are two things to bear in mind. The same two things. Number one, don't overcharge. And secondly, never, ever underpay. Obviously, we know what overcharging is. Overcharging is what we've spoken about for the last 25 minutes. Overcharging is when you feel you have to get in that last comment, the Kenny comment, the comment about two left hands, when you don't realize the power of the prowling tongue, when you don't remember that it's just not worth it. We've spent a lot of time talking about don't overcharge. Don't say that comment to your spouse, to a relative, to anyone. The pain, the irreparable damage to the shidduch, to the business partnership, to the relationship, in the shul, in the kehillah, in Klal Yisrael, sometimes is irreparable. You had an opportunity to look at that person and say, I'm sorry. Let's make amends. I was wrong. A word that you should say, but you didn't. You didn't pay the compliment. You didn't build a person up. You didn't tell them what they mean to you. Why not? Why not? Dehar tells us the same way in the next world a person will be punished for the words that they spoke when they should have remained silent. Equal to that is the punishment for the words that they didn't speak when they should have spoken up. Wow! Did we hear that shot from the Zohar? The first half, I believe most of us were familiar with. The punishment of a person who spoke when he should have remained silent, but the Zohar tells us equal to that is the punishment for underpaying, for remaining silent when you should have spoken up. That comment, that compliment, that well-placed, I miss you, I care about you, let's make amends and try again, just building the person up. Never underpay. because the Zohar says it's the same punishment for one who should have spoken up. Words of support, when those words aren't said, that's underpaying. And truth be told, when one does say those words, that is so worth it. The overcharging and not saying the word, our guiding light for that should be because it's just compliment, the word of encouragement, validate, acknowledge, recognize. Everybody needs chizuk. Do you hear? Everybody needs chizuk because words have impact. And that is just so worth it. If one takes a look, there is a Mishnah in the 6th parak of Pirkei Avos. It's a well-known Mishnah, the story of Rabbi ben Kisma. And I'm sure it's from the most well-known stories, how Rabbi ben Kisma was once going on the way. And there was a chance encounter with a man, and the man said, Rebbe, please come live in our city, and we'll pay you untold amounts of money. And he declined, he turned down the request. Most people focus on the part of that story. I'd like to focus, with your permission, on another question that happened a bit earlier in the story, not why he turned it down. I have a different question. It was a chance encounter, as the Mishnah clearly says, ufoga bi adam. It was a chance encounter. That man walking down the street, could it be then that a chance encounter? What happened that on the drop of a dime, he turned to Rabbi ben Kisma and said, Rebbe, please live in our city. We need you desperately, and we'll give you all the money in the world. What happened? It was a chance encounter. They weren't planning on exchanging a conversation. And on the drop of the dime, he turned to Rabbi ben Kisma and says, all the money in the world, just come live with us. What happened? I believe the answer is, you're right, it was a chance encounter. And the man was not walking down the street with the intention of finding a new Rav or Rosh Hashiva or somebody to mold this community. But the Mishnah clearly tells us in the 6th chapter of Pirkei Avos that when he walked by, Rabbi ben Kisma said to the man one word, Shalom, how are you? That man was so taken by the word of Rabbi ben Kisma. It was said with such a gefühl, such an Ibergegebenkeit, such a love, such a devotion, such feeling, that he stopped in his tracks and said, if one word could make me feel so good, so wanted, so loved, please come live in our city. That's the reward for not underpaying. Sometimes it's just, what can we do together? And when that man, on that chance encounter, heard that one word said with such love and such avon reyus from Rabbi ben Kisma, on the drop of the dime, he said, please, Rebbe, we need that type of talk. No underpaying. A number of years ago, I said over this story, and a Rebbe came over to me. I won't mention his name nor the name of the city, but this is the story that the Rebbe told me. He told me, I will show you the truth of that pshat that I had just said on Rabbi ben Kisma, of the reward when you don't underpay. He told me that a number of years earlier in the city that he lived in, one morning he was walking to Shachris. And on the other side of the street, a teenage boy was going in the opposite direction, not a boy that he knew at all. A Jewish boy was going down the opposite side of the street, and in that sense, the few feet between them, they passed each other. And this Rebbe told me how he turned to the boy, and he just gave the boy a beautiful smile and said, good morning, my friend, it's great to see you. Have a great day. Shalom. Later that night, the Rebbe was at home, and there was a knock on the door. He opens up the door, and there's that teenage boy from earlier in the day. Except now he looks and he sees that the teenager was clearly crying. He welcomes that teenager in. The teenager starts to explain how many hours he spent finding out the name of the Rebbe, the one that he passed, the address, and that's how he ended up there. He said, you spend so much time trying to locate me, and for what reason? And he continued to cry and said, This morning, when we passed each other, I'm embarrassed to say, but I was actually contemplating ending my life, contemplating making it the last day in this world. The boy told the Rebbe, I felt nobody recognizes me, validates, acknowledges, notices, and so I had given thought, Rahman al-Itzlan, he said, to ending his life. But when you passed me, you don't even know me, and you looked at me with such a brilliant smile and said, hey, how you doing? Good morning, have a great day. You didn't underpay. You spoke up. You gave me life. You recognized, you acknowledged, you validated, you complimented me. I want to stay alive because of you, Rebbe. The Rebbe told me it was about 6 years later. The next day they started to learn Bechavrusa. And after these past 6 years, they continue to have this beautiful Chavrusa Shaf. The life was saved because of one word. The life was saved because there was no underpaying. Because Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma, because the Rebbe turned to the boy, not knowing the boy, and said, how you doing? Have a great day. And the boy admittedly told the Rebbe, please stay with me, learn with me. My Rabbi say that is the power of not overcharging and nor underpaying. Please let's remember the next time we're so short to whoever it might be, that don't. It's just not worth it. And the next time, shidduchim, on the shalom bayis, on the business partnership, on the unity within a shul and the framework of Klal Yisrael, but perhaps where words have the greatest impact is with our children. And it's with this final thought before Dvar Torah that I'd like to conclude. You know why I'm so grateful to Rabbi Moskowitz for having given the topic Words Have Impact? Because with all that we've spoken about, the greatest impact our words have is with our kinderlach. So don't blow it. I have a very dear friend in Milwaukee. Lauren Anton passed away at a young age. She was a tremendous person, renowned for many spectacular things and midos. But certainly top on that list was not only never, ever speaking Lashon Hara, Rechilas, Einos Dvarim, Maisi Shemra, but not allowing anybody near her to do so. Her children grew up knowing you just can't speak it. It's just not worth it. Shait Lashon Techave, you can't do it. Raise your children like that. And that's the way that my friend's children indeed were raised. So much so that that night that Mrs. Lauren Anton, Aleh Shalom, passed away, some of the children were in the hospital in the room, and they were actually around the bed where she was. And then at that moment of Yitzias HaNeshama, when she was no longer in this world, you could only imagine how the children started to cry. And one of the little children all of a sudden piped up and says, 1 minute, I have an idea. One of us, let's say a little bit of Lashon Hara, that's sure to wake mommy up. If we speak Lashon Hara, she's surely going to wake up and give us Mussar and tell us not to. Words have impact. That's what it means to train our children with the basic training. What you can say and what you can't say. Imagine a little child saying, let's speak a word of Lashon Hara that's sure to wake mommy up because she won't be able to tolerate it. We'll have her back again. I had said over this story, and a man came over to me afterwards, and he wanted to share with me his own story. And when he said it the first time, I noticed he was so unusually emotional. And he said it a second time with the same emotion. I said, do you mind if I ask you a question? You're telling me this story like it happened to somebody else, but something tells me based on your emotion, it happened to you and your wife. And he smiled and he said, yes. I called my wife over because I wanted her to hear the story from this couple as well. I'll tell you the story and then we'll end with a bracha. This man told me, he realized that I speak about not overcharging, not underpaying, and raising children with words have impact, what he calls lashon naki. Lashon naki means, let's raise our children. There are words you can't say. There are words, I'm not talking about words only of lashon hara, chilas, oinos, dvarim, of course not nivel peh, and words that can't be said, but words that are just not appropriate, or whatever that word might be, the word hate, the word disgusting, whatever the word is. Create your own framework in your family, lashon naki. Let your children know there are just words you don't say. Lashon naki. And then he told me this story. They live in Eretz Yisrael and they had just ended a vacation. And as many do when they go on vacation with a minivan, instead of taking one large suitcase, everybody had 3 or 4 small peklach. So if you have a husband and a wife and a number of children, there were dozens of peklach. They come back in the late afternoon to their home in Eretz Yisrael. And the man tells his wife, here's what we're going to do. You go into the house. I'll stay here by the van. The kids will create an assembly line, and we will pass in the packages through the assembly line of the children, from me through the children to you in the kitchen. And then when that's finished in about 30, 40 minutes, I have to go straight to Daven Mincha and Marav. And the wife acquiesced. She said it's a perfect idea. He stayed by the van, the trunk. She went into the kitchen. The children created a delicious assembly line, and all of the dozens of peklach started to go in. The mother started unpacking. And at one point, one of the children come out and say, Abba, Mommy said you're working like a dog. Yeah, Mommy just said you're working like a dog. Mommy said I'm working like a dog? But we live with lashon naki. That's not lashon naki. Mommy said that? It's not possible. She said that? Something must be wrong. Something must be wrong. He ran into the kitchen and he told me his wife was standing by the sink, leaning on it with one hand. With the other hand, she had a glass bottle of water. Her face was partially blue. Her lips were very blue. The bottle of water fell out of her hand and shattered. Brain or something deadly, critically serious. But he knew something was wrong because Mommy wouldn't say that. And so quickly he called the equivalent of Hatzalah 911, and they were rushed to the hospital. This was a young woman, a woman who was healthy, and the doctors, with the help of a number of doctors, were the messengers of the Ribbono Shel Olam. They helped save her life. They came out of the room of this young woman and told the husband, you're the husband? I want you to know, by bringing her in when you did, you saved your wife's life. Another 15 or 20 minutes, not possible that she would still be here. You saved her life. And there we were. He turned to my wife and myself and he said, please tell everybody, lashon naki saves lives. Lashon naki saved the life of my wife, because when I heard the children say that, she said, Abba said, Ima said that you're working like a dog. I knew we don't speak that way. It's not a refined, sensitive way to speak. By the way, my wife, she should live and be well, pointed out with your brain, the aneurysm, when the blood vessels that nothing was working, that the worst thing that you said was, Abba's working like a dog. Unfortunately, maybe when people are in that situation, to realize no overcharging, no underpaying. Overcharging, it's just not worth it. Underpaying, it is so, so worth it. I would like to end with a bracha. It's a vart of my father's, Atzal Harav Mordechai Shapiro, whose yahrzeit is just a few days on the 27th of Mar Cheshvan, Friday night on Shabbos. I'd like to say these closing words, L'zecher u'le'ishirach, together with Rivka, returning with Rivka, having made the shidduch with Yitzchak. And the pasuk says, Vayetze Yitzchak l'suach basada. Yitzchak was in the field, l'suach basada. What does l'suach basada mean? Now, we're very familiar with Rashi. Rashi tells us l'suach is on the word sicha, prayer, tefillah. And that's the way Yishpach Sichai, that's the way Rashi translates the pasuk Lasuach Basada, to daven, from the word Sicha, to speak. The Rashbam says differently. The Rashbam says Lasuach Basada is from the word to plant trees, all of the plants, the vegetation of the field. So we have Rashi telling us Lasuach is Sicha, to speak. We have the Rashbam telling us, Lasuach, Sicha, is from the word to plant trees. My father, and tosses it into the ground, and then covers it up with soil. Is anything going to become of that seed? Does anything happen from that seed? And although underground it begins to germinate and begins to grow in the roots, it's not for a number of months, sometimes a few years, sometimes many years, until we see the payros, the fruits of our labor, until we see what that seed created after we tossed it into the soil. And my father's Atzal said it's the same way with our words. Words have impact. And we threw it at the person, the spouse, the parent, the child, the sibling, the neighbor, in shul, in the community, in Klal Yisrael. That word sometimes begins to germinate, and for a number of months and many years causes untold angst, anguish, pain, irreparable damage. But sometimes we know those words. They're planted, like the word of Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma, Shalom, how are you? Like the word of the Rebbe to the boy, how you doing? Great to see you, have a wonderful day, it saved a life. Yes, words are like seeds. Just like by the seed, it's tossed into the ground and we may not see the payros for a number of years, but it continues to grow. That word that's well placed, that complement, that type of word could build. Forever underpay. Say it, because that is so worth it. And Be'ezras Hashem, those words will bring us together, continue to unite us, and we'll close the same way we opened. Mikol hatzaros habois aleichem ana yochol hatzil eschem. From all that we're going through, please, Ribbono Shel Olam, grant refuahs, grant Yeshuas, save us, please, please bring the Gula Shalema. And the Ribbono Shel Olam says, Shoit Lashon Techave.